letting you.
Good afternoon. Today is September 28, 2023. It is shortly after 1 p.m. My name is Carl Cox. I'm a private attorney. I am Clackamas County's land use hearings officer with authority to conduct this hearing and make a determination in this matter. This is the file Z0083-23. This is an appeal of a approval of a design review by the county for a application by by Jason Varga of the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District. For the audience, if you did not get an opportunity to come in, or you know someone who's trying to reach this and did not, the record will, at a minimum, stay open till 4 p.m. today for a submission of a written comment, and I will certainly consider any written comment submitted by 4 p.m. today. If the record stays open, then that period as well will be extended. I have a few housekeeping matters. This is a quasi-judicial land use hearing, which means two important things for those participating in this hearing. First, all of the criteria that can be used in reaching a decision have been identified in the staff report. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the criteria identified in the staff report or other relevant criteria found in the comprehensive plan or other land use regulation that the person believes applies to the decision. Accordingly, please direct your testimony to a relevant approval criterion. Second, failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue may preclude appeal to the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Once final, this decision may be appealed to the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals. I have a couple of other statements. First, I've not received any ex parte contact in this matter, meaning no one contacted me outside of these proceedings to try to persuade me concerning a fact or issue present in this matter. I did download and review all of the exhibits and materials that were publicly posted to the county's website for this matter, the notice, etc., as well as the appellant's documents. Further, I have prior involvement in this matter as this is an extension of same or similar hearings that have happened before with North Clackamas Parks and Rec concerning the Concord Elementary School. At this time, I'm going to ask that the county provide an explanation concerning participation in this hearing via the Zoom platform.
Thank you. This public hearing will be conducted virtually using the Zoom platform. Panelists for today's hearing, which include the hearings officer, county staff, and the applicant and the appellant, have both audio and video capability. Audience members who have joined the meeting will have their mics muted unless they wish to testify, in which case they will be called upon to do so by the county staff moderator. Audience members' video will not be turned on at any time. Today's hearing is being recorded as required by law. The county will make every effort to post the recording on the website later today. There is a designated time during the hearing when it will be open for testimony. The hearings officer will make it clear when this is. If you want to provide testimony, you will utilize the raise hand feature. For folks on PC or iPad, you have a raise hand button on the Zoom bar, either at the top or bottom of your screen, depending on your device. When the moderator switches you over to provide testimony, your screen will look different for a little while. Primarily, you will see all participants' cameras, not just the one who's speaking. Staff will call upon you when it's time for you to provide your testimony. Be sure to provide your name and mailing address when you begin. Once you have provided your testimony, your mic will be muted and your screen will be returned to normal. If the record is left open at the end of this hearing and you wish to submit additional written testimony, you can email your written testimony to myself at mlord@clackamas.us, or you can mail it to the Clackamas County Planning and Zoning Division at 150 Beaver Creek Road, Oregon City, 97045. My contact email address is also available on the webpage where you found the link for today's Zoom hearing. Testimony must be received by 4 p.m. on the day the record closes. People who testify and provide their mailing address will receive a copy of the hearings officer's written decision. If you do not wish to testify but would like to receive the decision, you must provide your email or your standard mailing address to either by email to myself at mlord@clackamas.us or by entering it in the Zoom chat function during this hearing.
Thank you. The order of proceedings will be that I'll ask the appellant to begin the hearing by presenting the appeal, the reasons for the appeal, and any supporting evidence or testimony that the appellant wishes to consider, followed by an opportunity by the applicant to also present evidence and testimony in support of the county's approval of this. Or we could then, and rather than the applicant go next, I could have the county directly state its review of the approval criterion and the decision, and then followed by the applicant having an opportunity to supplement that. Any questions before we begin? Mr. Farley.
Yeah, I have a question.
Oh, yes.
That is actually a different order than we were given by the planner. So could you go over that again? We were told it was going to be county presents, we present, appellant presents, county rebuts, we rebut.
I can change the order. Sometimes it's more, I like to hear the appeal and have people have an opportunity rather than start with the county and the applicant and then the appeal, and then it requires a complete rebuttal period by but I'm familiar. I've run these hearings both ways. Mr. Farley, do you have a preference?
I don't really have a preference as long as I get maybe a say near.
Absolutely. You're here to get a say for sure.
Yeah, and so I'm with Debbie Cleek. I remember it being the other way every time I've been in it, but I don't mind going over my material first and giving the county and the applicant chance to basically they'll be rebutting what I'm saying.
Exactly. I can change the order back. Your appeal was pretty narrow. Let's start with the county. I believe you have a presentation.
Well, sorry for the confusion. I do have a presentation. I will go ahead and share my screen and we can get started that way. I made a PowerPoint for you folks today. So this is, as you've mentioned, this is the appeal hearing for a design review application. This is land use file Z0083-23. My name is Melissa Lord. I am the planner representing the Clackamas County Planning and Zoning Division today. So I'll give you a brief background on this application as a whole and for the property or the project as a whole to start things off. This is a nearly 6-acre property that's located within the R7, R8.5, and the OSM zoning districts. This project has been reviewed in a couple different land use applications, most recently land use file Z0083-23, which was a conditional use permit to utilize a small portion of the existing structure on site, which was formerly the Concord School, for the Clackamas Parks and Rec, North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District offices, as well as indoor recreational uses. Most of that building during this initial land use application was going to be left unused or left as a shell. Subsequently and more recently, we've reviewed this application under land use file Z0083-23, which was another conditional use permit, which involved a project more similar, aligned with the one that we're looking at today. This was to use the entire Concord School building for those uses, as well as establishing a library on the same property. This subject property has no environmental overlays that are mapped on the site. That would include steep slopes, mass movement hazard areas, habitat conservation areas, and the like. Mid-August, the planning department issued a decision of approval with conditions on a design review application, this application, and within the 12-day appeal period, an appeal was filed. And so that's what brings us here today.
Thank you very much. Did the applicant,
Oh, I have more, but I can stop
yeah,
it.
no, go ahead. The way you paused, I thought that was what you had.
No, I'll make it quick. This property here on the screen highlighted with this shading color is our subject property. So you'll note it's on Concord Road, sandwiched in between McLaughlin Boulevard to our southwest and Oatfield Road to our northeast. The design review application proposes to build a new 15,000 square foot public library. It involves renovating the existing building on site, again, that former Concord School building, and that would include the community center, the offices for the Parks and Rec District, and indoor rec space or community centers, community spaces. This site will also involve, this project will also involve creating 2 parking lots on site. There are currently 2 parking lots on site, but those will be redone. The main primary parking lot will be accessed off of Concord Road, generally located in the same area where the current parking lot exists. And the secondary parking lot will be much smaller and accessed from Spalding Avenue. Again, there is a current parking lot there, and that will be redone as well. The proposal also includes creating a nearly 2-acre public park, which will be fit with outdoor play equipment, lighting, pathways, and 2 different connectors into the adjacent neighborhoods. So again, orienteering a little bit here, we've got our subject property in the middle of this screen on Concord Road between McLaughlin Boulevard and Oatfield Road. Circled in the red coloring is the existing building on site that will be used for the Parks District offices and the community center. And then this orange oval shape is generally indicating the location of the new public library. The 2 circles here are showing the proposed parking lot areas. The first being the main parking lot access from Concord Road would be this larger circle here, and then the smaller parking lot would be accessed from Spalding Avenue, up where my mouse is indicating here as well. And then the 2-acre park will be located generally in this northern portion of this site, back where this red circle is indicating. I did mention the property has 3 different zoning districts. Open space management occupies most of the park and library area, as well as the main parking lot. And then the R7 and R8.5 zoning districts, which are urban, low-density residential districts, are primarily located where that existing school building is, that community center building. This is the left side of our site plan. It's quite large, so it just generally shows here the community park area and the library. And then the right side of the site plan shows again the library, the existing building on site, and then the primary parking lot access from Concord Road, which would be to the right of our screen. These are some renderings that the applicant put together, which show in the top left drawing, we've got the new public library on our left side of the image, right next to the existing structure on the right side of the image, and we've got different vantage points of what the site could look like or would look like once it's constructed. The initial decision that staff issued for this design review application was approval with conditions. So I'll just go through briefly some of the main review criteria before concluding my presentation. The zoning districts, the open space management, R7 and R8.5, these uses are either primary uses, accessory uses, or conditional uses. The conditional uses is what necessitated that land use application Z0083-23, which was reviewed earlier this year and approved with conditions for the conditional uses on site. The dimensional standards, such as setbacks, building height, lot coverage, are either met or can be met with the conditions of approval that were included in that staff decision. ZDO section 707 and 1004 relate to historic preservation as well as historic landmarks. These two sections are not applicable to this property. While the existing Concord School building is very old, it is not listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and it is not designated as a Clackamas County historic landmark, a historic district, or a historic corridor. Therefore, these sections were not applicable to this review. In section 1005, we look at site design. At a high level, the staff found that this section was complied with or could be complied with conditions. There are interconnected walkways on site that are fit with site lighting, bollard style lighting to light up pathways in the park area, the connections to two adjoining neighborhoods off of Olive Avenue and Sunset Court, which are to the northwest of the property. A minimum of an 8-foot wide walkway is required to connect the sidewalk from Concord Road up to the main entrance of the proposed library building. There was also a minimum 5-foot walkway that was required to be provided through the primary parking lot off of Concord Road as well. And that both of these were addressed with conditions of approval. The building design for the library also complied with the standards, as it had clearly defined public entrances and covered entryways. The materials chosen for the library comply with the requirements as well. They complement the site and the existing Concord School building, but don't mimic it, which is an important distinction when we look at historic preservation guidelines. Again, while the site is not listed on the National Registry or the Clackamas County Historic Registry, it's still important to consider those guidelines when talking about design and building materials. The plants that were selected to ensure that they grow to a height that would allow for adequate visibility into parking areas, and that would enhance site safety. Earlier today, my computer crashed, so I haven't rebuilt this whole PowerPoint. So unfortunately, this is where my PowerPoint ends, but I will still address verbally some of the other review criteria. Of course, we'll hear more about ZDO section 1007 related to roads and connectivity, as that's largely the topic of today's appeal hearing. In addition to this, staff reviewed section 1009, which relates to landscaping, and found that the landscaping criteria either were met or could be met with conditions of approval. Similarly, section 1021, as it relates to trash and recycling, this section could be met with conditions of approval as well. And following the approval decision, the applicant had submitted additional materials that I added into the record today that address the condition of approval related to section 1021. So these standards are met as well. And then lastly, we looked at section 1015 for parking. There are no parking minimums due to the climate friendly and equitable communities rules in the OARs. There is still a maximum parking standard, which is 204 parking spaces would be the maximum number of vehicle parking spaces, and the applicant has proposed to provide less than that. So again, they've complied with the vehicle parking requirements and have adequately addressed the bicycle parking requirements that are required by section 1015 as well. My last point is if the application is approved, I would just recommend an additional condition of approval. This was not included in the original staff decision, but I did notice that there are some inconsistencies between some of the plan sheets that were provided. So I would recommend that these get cleaned up so that there are consistent representations of the project on the final plan set. So one example is Exhibit 25, which was added to the record today, was the updated landscape plan. There is a property, I'm just going to go back to my site plan. There is a property, which is the Walmart property, which is just located where my mouse is here, right below this OSM zoning district. This is off of the subject property, and there was some back and forth initially of whether or not this site was going to be included in the design review application or not. So we do not have the property owner's signature for that Walmart property, and so if the applicant is proposing to put landscaping and development on that site, then we would need their signature. Alternatively, we could recommend a condition that would ask them to not propose the landscaping or any other development on that site and just keep it to the subject property. Another example would be Exhibit 23 about the trash enclosure. That plan does not show a walkway going through the parking lot, which was a condition of approval, but the landscaping plan does. So just some inconsistencies there that I would recommend that we address. So that does conclude my presentation.
Okay. And by inconsistencies to address, you're just saying that you're proposing conditions of approval, just requiring that these things be resolved as far as like.
Correct. Yeah, my concern is just if I've got one approved plan that shows a walkway through the parking lot and another approved plan that shows it all landscaping, which one gets built. So just making sure that we've got similarities.
Clarity there. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm happy to answer questions. I am joined today by Ken Kent from the Development Engineering Department as well, so we can address any questions as they come up.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does the applicant have something to add to the county's presentation in support of approving the application?
I think we do. We have a quick presentation, and
Okay.
Mel has hit on most of what we have. So I'll try to keep it quick. It's similar to what we shared with the design review hearing in July, but it might give us some additional context. And Mel, in terms of those additional conditions of approval, that makes total sense to the design team, of course, and we'll get those plans cleaned up. Give me just a second to figure out my screen sharing. I'm traveling, so of course it's nothing is ever easy, right?
It's going to be one of those days.
I know. All right, let's see. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
So I just wanted to start out, one thing I did want to mention was the incredible amount of people that have participated in this project so far, and the incredible amount of input that not just the design team has had, but we've had on this project in general. I think we're all familiar with this beginning in 2017. Advocacy for that has began way before that, but that settlement between the county and the city of Gladstone. Then a plan was developed in 2018, and in 2019 there was a 15-person task force that was formed that represented a wide variety of backgrounds and interests. And over the course of 2019 and 2020, there were a series of public open houses, surveys, focus groups to facilitate even more input from the community. And that culminated in a master plan that the task force helped approve and develop that was presented to the Board of County Commissioners back in 2021. So this has been a long and participatory process up to this point. I think Mel did a great job of sharing, kind of orienting everyone on the site. One thing that I want to mention is that we've tried to really create a balance between open space and parking, making sure that we have sufficient parking to support the needs on site, but also maintaining as much of that that open park and playground space as possible. And orienting the library in such a way that it would not detract from the open space. It would have a separate identity from the community center and still have access to parking and accessible walkways and paths through the site. This is a plan in a little bit more detail that shows those pedestrian connectivity through the site that Mel had mentioned, connecting back into the two neighborhoods. Up onto Spalding, and then the addition of the new pedestrian walkway through the parking lot site, and then along Concord Road with the improvements all along our site frontage. We also have a mid-block pedestrian crosswalk that is being improved as part of this scope as well. So you can see the robust pedestrian connectivity throughout the site.
Well, did you submit this as an exhibit, Ms. Manser?
This has not been submitted as an exhibit yet, but I will include that.
Perfect.
I'll just go very quickly through this to orient people on the site. This is that there's an amphitheater with a splash pad that has a connection to the library within this walking path. This would be entering from Olive, where you have a visual of the entire site and seeing the new pavilion with restrooms and picnic area, as well as the playground and the open playing area. This would be, we call this the north entry to confuse everyone. It's actually planned north, but it would be the east coming on from Spalding. You can see the large open area that's sized for youth sports, but will most likely be used for just open picnicking and kite flying, things like that, just an open use area. Mel mentioned this creation of a plaza that will create a accessible entry to both buildings, but with a dual usage of this could be used for public gathering and festivals, and it has the infrastructure to support things like tents and food trucks and things along those lines. And this would just be a typical day. This is the entry to the park from the parking lot, and I think this illustrates the balance that we were trying to create with the location of the parking and the building, and creating a visual connectivity through the site, and making sure that that building doesn't squeeze in that narrow neck of the site too much to disallow pedestrian access through. In terms of the actual building design, our building is raised about 30 inches above the grade at the plaza to minimize the amount of building that's recessed into the steep hill. If you're familiar with the site, there's quite a bit of grade change. But we've created a universal ramp going up into that main public entry, in accordance with the design standards, overhangs and a recessed entry to try to mitigate some of that west-facing sun, which is obviously important in libraries, and then some sunscreens as well. This is the existing building of the school, but you can get a better idea of what that new accessible entry going into an elevator and a new lobby would look like. The idea of creating a campus is obviously very important. We started with the existing brick blend on the Concord building and had a interpretation of that, pulling two colors, the Columbia Red and Ruby blend, to create something that was sympathetic but not a duplication of that existing brick, so that they will look, have this idea of a campus together. So you can kind of see those laid out here. I think the last thing I wanted to mention about the exterior is the design of the sunscreen, because this has had a lot of public input and it has driven the evolution of the design. We had started out when we had pulled this building as a separate building out, away from the Concord School, as pulling some datum lines in a very horizontal facade. The feedback we got from the task force was we needed to add some verticality and some kind of civic presence to this facade. And so we did that by adding some additional kind of large soaring windows into the reading room and the main entry. But in order to control that, we needed to have a sunscreen, which has some homage to the existing brick texture at Concord, but also an idea of maybe book stacking and then pulling some kind of natural influences from how a dappled light would come through the canopy of a tree when you're inside. So you'll have kind of two different experiences seeing the screen from the exterior or the interior. And it would be kind of an iconic building identity at night. I won't touch much on the interior. I do want to mention there is a public meeting room with some restrooms and things like that that would be allowed, that's situated to allow after-hour access. And then if you were to come through this main lobby, you would enter the main kind of stack and reading area with a consolidated staff work area, lounges, which are oriented towards these big soaring windows to draw that connection into the park. And then a children's area that's set back, but still has this connection to the rest of the reading room. And these are just a few views. Orient you inside. We're using dowel laminated timber as our main structural material on the roof, which is sustainable, but it also creates some great acoustic properties for the interior of that space. You can see that view framed of the park out through that big window. And these are our lounges, which are oriented towards those large windows in the park. And the last thing is just, this is a view, an idea of what's happening inside that community center entry when you would walk in, and this celebration of the past and the historic nature of the school with a graphic kind of representation as you walk into the lobby of the old use as a school or a historic photo. So that's just a little bit of additional information from our team to support the summary of the project that Mel had shared earlier. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any clarifying questions about.
I think perhaps after I hear from the appellant. Do we have someone else from the in support of the application on behalf of the applicant before we move to the appellant? Okay. Mr. Farley.
All right, let me see if I can get my screen to work. Make sure I share the right thing. And let's see.
And will you submit this as an exhibit?
Yes, I emailed it to Melissa earlier to include as an exhibit, this presentation.
I received.
Was that emailed to me earlier today? Well,
It was earlier today.
Okay, I haven't gotten it yet, but because of my issues, not yours, I'm sure.
If needed, I can email it again. It does follow my memo pretty closely, but it provides some imageries to make this a little more exciting than as much words as I put on these screens. But
I did receive and review your memorandum. Okay,
so to start, my name is Will Farley, and I reside at 3910 Southeast Few Acres Road, just a short distance from this property. I am a professional civil engineer, has worked in transportation engineering and land use for now over a decade, and my educational background is on pedestrian, bicycle, and transit infrastructure. Hopefully you're seeing the full screen slideshow and not my notes, so I don't give away anything.
I see a slide.
Okay, so I want to start. I believe this is a wonderful project. I am super excited, like many of my neighbors, to have the community center and Oak Lodge Public Library being considered for the Concord Elementary site. It is going to be such a great asset to this community to provide the library, community space. I really can't, it's hard to convey my excitement of this project. I believe it's wonderful. But I am appealing this application for review by you, Mr. Cox, because I want to try to make this project as successful as possible and being the heart of this community, just like stated by the current Oak Lodge Library Director. I'm going to step back a bit in the process. During the master planning for this library and community center, the Concord Elementary School property stood out for its perceived multimodal access from both Southeast Oakfield and Southeast McLaughlin Boulevard. The master plan identified the site's ability to be accessed using nearby bus stops, bikeways, or pedestrian routes, and listed the fact that neighbors are able to walk to the site as a significant opportunity for this location. As discussed in the staff report and the applicant's material, the site is just off of Concord Road between McLaughlin Boulevard and Oakfield Road. This is a great location with the potential to be accessed not only by the people traveling by car using McLaughlin Boulevard, but by the bus routes on Oakfield Road to the east, the bikeways on Oakfield and Concord, and possibly even residents on foot from many of the nearby neighborhoods. But what I haven't seen in any of the material presented at either the conditional use permit hearing that you presented over or the design review committee is the fact that Concord Road is missing a significant amount of sidewalk for approximately 450 feet east of the site, which limits safe pedestrian routes to be mostly from McLaughlin Boulevard, Olive and Kellogg to the north of the site, or Harold Avenue to the south. The absence of a pedestrian facility east of this site leaves out a large area of homes that won't have a comfortable or safe walking route to the new project. I included some photos of the site, or photos of where I'm talking about. As you can see in this image looking west from Oakfield Road, Concord is missing pedestrian facilities that allow for safe and comfortable access from the nearby neighborhood to the east. While some people are capable of walking in the bike lane, it is often overgrown by hedges or obstructed by garbage cans, which push people to walk in the vehicle lane, where vehicles are passing at about 35 miles an hour or faster. As a cyclist that frequents this route to get to the trolley trail, I also find myself usually riding in traffic on the downhill direction to avoid debris or objects in the bike lane, as well as any pedestrians that are walking in it to get to where they need to go on McLaughlin. This is the image looking from the opposite end, looking towards Oakfield from Harold, just east of the subject property. As you can see on the left, the existing sidewalk ends along the north side, pushing pedestrians into the bike lane when walking up the hill. And I'm taking this photo, I'm standing in the location where the sidewalk ends on the south side of Concord.
You're talking about across the street.
Correct.
Okay.
I'm just a little bit, I'm going to get my directions mixed up as we usually do.
Oh, it's hard.
I'm a little bit east of the site, east of where that crosswalk is going to be improved. So okay. This brings me to the reasons why I'm appealing this staff decision. The design review application is subject to the criteria identified in Clackamas County Zoning and Development Ordinance, Section 1007, for roads and connectivity. To start, I want to highlight that 1007.01B states that right-of-way dedications and improvements shall be required of all new developments consistent with this section, the county roadway standards, and chapters 5 and 10 of the county's comprehensive plan. I'll be going into those chapters of the comprehensive plan a little bit more detail here shortly. Continuing through it, subsection E of the general provision states that all roads shall be designed to adequately and safely accommodate vehicles, pedestrians, and bicycles according to those same chapters in the comprehensive plan. Subsection F states that the roadway shall be designed to accommodate transit and provide separation for motor vehicle, bicycle, and pedestrian traffic. Subsection G states that the needs of all modes, whether it be vehicle, bicycle, or pedestrian, shall be balanced to provide for the safe and efficient flow of traffic. Moving on to section 1007-02, this is specific to public and private roadways. Subsection A states that they shall be developed according to the classifications, guidelines, tables, figures, and maps in chapters 5 and 10 of the county's comprehensive plan and the county's roadway standards. And subsection E states that new developments may be required to dedicate property and or make improvements to existing rights-of-way as deemed necessary by county staff and consistent with this section, the chapters in the comprehensive plan, and the county's roadway standards. So going into the transportation system plan, this is going a little down the rabbit hole a bit, but chapter 5 of the comprehensive plan is the transportation system plan. This is the document that guides transportation-related decisions and identifies the transportation needs and priorities within an unincorporated Clackamas County. 6 goals are listed in the TSP to assist in the implementation of the county's vision of having a well-maintained and designed transportation system that provides safety, flexibility, mobility, accessibility, and connectivity for people, goods, and services. While several applicable policies are given in Chapter 5 of the Comprehensive Plan, Section 5R provides policies on improvements that are to be asked of new developments. The first policy in this section of the TSP guides staff to require new development to be served by adequate transportation facilities and access points that are designed and constructed to safely accommodate all modes of travel. The second policy states that right-of-way dedication, on-site frontage improvements, and off-site improvements necessary to safely handle the expected traffic generated and travel by active modes are required for new developments. And then section 5R3 states that the county should assess anticipated off-site traffic impacts for new development, and that the developer may be required to participate financially or otherwise in the provision of off-site improvements, dedications, or other requirements. So with these criteria and policies in mind, I want to go over the expected impacts from the proposal. The applicant, as you've seen, is proposing a new public library that's 15,360 square feet and the remodel of a nearly vacant building to become a 25,642 square foot community center and 19,058 square feet office for employees of the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District. Confirming what the applicant's traffic impact analysis reported when submitted for the previous conditional use permit, the proposed use of the site is expected to generate 93 trips during the morning peak hour, 216 trips during the evening peak hour, and 2,053 additional daily trips, or average daily trips. This would roughly be equivalent to the traffic impacts associated with the development of a 200-lot single-family subdivision on this property. So quite a significant increase in traffic for this area. While not applicable to this case due to the previous use being non-conforming and have been vacant for an extended period of time, I did want to show kind of the comparison between the proposed uses and the Concord Elementary School when it was occupied. Based on calculations for from the trip generation manual by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, even though there may be a reduced impact in the morning peak hour, the new public library and community center will still generate a significant impact during the evening peak hour, as well as throughout the average weekday. Not shown on this screen, but I did want to bring it up, is that, and it wasn't included in the traffic impact analysis from the applicant, is how many trips could end up visiting the site by walking, biking, or using the nearby available transit. The Institute of Transportation Engineers does provide some data regarding trips by active modes for community centers and offices. And using the calculations they provide, it estimates there are at least 4 trips that will be from active modes during the morning peak hour and 8 trips from active modes during the evening peak hour. While there wasn't data available for these modes for libraries, due to its location and the significant number of homes around the site and the availability of nearby transit, the library should be generating quite a bit additional walking, biking, and transit trips as well. So where will these trips be coming from? I've kind of zoomed out a little bit from the site here. While I may disagree slightly about the proposed uses having a similar impact as the elementary school that was presented in the applicant's traffic impact analysis, I will concur that these trips will largely be drawn from the immediate and surrounding neighborhoods, as that's the intention of a community center and the library. It's just such a great asset for the community. So, kind of summarizing my appeal, I believe that the project will contribute a significant amount of traffic to the nearby transportation system, mostly to and from the surrounding neighborhoods. The traffic will consist of not only vehicle trips, but trips made by pedestrians and bicyclists, and some using transit. As I've shown earlier, Concord Road east of this subject site, immediately east of the subject site, does not provide adequate transportation facilities, including sidewalks or any other facilities sufficient to safely handle the expected travel by active modes from this site. So, briefly covering the criteria once more, 1007-1B is not met due to the requiring of improvement, or due to the required improvements not being consistent with policy 5R from the county's comprehensive plan. Staff are expected to require new developments to be served by adequate transportation facilities, require new developments to construct off-site improvements necessary to safely handle expected traffic generated by the development and travel by active modes, and possibly require the developer to participate in the provision of off-site improvements to mitigate these off-site impacts. 1007E is not met due to the Concord Road not adequately nor safely accommodating pedestrians immediately east of the site. 1007.01F is not met due to Concord Road immediately east of the site not providing separation between vehicles, bikes, and pedestrians. And 1007-01G is not met because the needs of pedestrians immediately east of the site are not balanced with the needs of bicyclists or motor vehicles. Moving to section 1007-02, A is not met due to Concord east of the site not being developed according to the cross-section of a minor arterial in the county's comprehensive plan. The roadway does not support pedestrians, even though it is also considered an arterial in the essential pedestrian network of the comprehensive plan. Section 1007-02E is not met because the required dedication along Concord and the lack of required off-site improvements are not consistent with policy 5R of Chapter 5 of the county's comprehensive plan. So, since the approval criteria are not met for this project, I would like to recommend the Library and Community Center contribute to project number 1061 identified in Chapter 5 of the comprehensive plan. This project, identified in the Transportation System Plan, called for the completion of gaps in pedestrian facilities along Concord Road, all the way from River Road far to the west to Oatfield Road. But it also includes this area, includes facilities in the area of concern, and being in the TSP, it would likely be eligible for credits for transportation system development charges. This project was identified as early back as 1996 when it was listed as a high priority in the county's pedestrian master plan. Understanding that there is limited right-of-way to the east of the site and that the applicant cannot necessarily utilize eminent domain to acquire the necessary area, I'd like to propose conditioning the applicant for providing a curb-tight sidewalk along the north side of Concord Road between Harold Avenue and Oatfield Road in the place of the existing bike lane. Experienced cyclists would be shifted to the downhill motor vehicle lane, while inexperienced cyclists such as children will be able to ride on the sidewalk. Completing this gap, even on just the north side, will improve accessibility for pedestrians walking from about 161 homes within half a mile to the east, as well as a senior housing facility in that area. With the separated facility, pedestrians will either be able to walk on a low-volume local roadway where travel speeds are at or below 25 miles an hour, or within a separated facility away from motor vehicle traffic. The proposed sidewalk would complete the connection on the county's essential pedestrian network and help balance the needs for modes of transportation, bringing this project into compliance with the required criteria in both section 1007-01 and 1007-02. Since any mitigation required of the project needs to meet constitutional requirements, a preliminary engineering estimate was put together to compare the cost of the project's expected impacts to the transportation system to ensure what is recommended is roughly proportionate. Using costs for materials for projects in Clackamas County listed in Oregon Department of Transportation's average bid tables for 2022, as well as costs identified by the Portland Bureau of Transportation, it was estimated that constructing the sidewalk on the north side would run about $720,000. I tried to keep this estimate conservatively high because of inflation and all the fun stuff going with construction at this time. Should the county wish to have a facility constructed in its ultimate location instead, and they want to acquire the property for public right-of-way, the necessary property would probably cost the county between $135,000 and $250,000 to get 35-foot half-street right-of-way between Harold and Oakfield. If this is the direction the county wants to go, they should at least require a fee in lieu for the construction of the sidewalk while they work to acquire the right-of-way, so the recommended sidewalk can be funded afterwards. To go into the proportionality test, the county's transportation system development methodology, I used it to kind of determine rough proportionality. Based on the methodology from 2017 and updated in 2020, transportation system development charges were calculated by identifying the top priorities for capital projects throughout the county and determining a cost per trip attributable to growth. Since system development charges are only expected to represent 44% of the total costs of the needed projects identified as priorities by the county, it can be interpreted that the cost of the project's expected impacts are approximately $1.25 million. So I've gone through this rather quick, but to conclude, the staff decision for Z0083-23 did not sufficiently address Section 1007, and multiple criteria were not met for roads and connectivity. Policies in the county's transportation system plan were not followed when ensuring new developments are to be served by adequate transportation facilities, and they should be required to construct off-site improvements necessary to safely handle the expected traffic and travel by active modes. Since this is an application from Clackamas County Department being reviewed and conditioned by county staff, this application should be held to an equal or higher standard than other private development projects when exactions are being determined. To meet the criteria, I am recommending that the county condition the interim construction of a sidewalk on the north side of Concord between the site and Oakfield Road, which is part of project number 1061 in the TSP. The recommended mitigation would have nexus and be roughly proportionate to the traffic impacts projected to be generated by the development, and would balance the need of all modes of transportation on Concord east of the site. If the county wishes for the sidewalk to be constructed in its ultimate location according to a minor arterial, I would recommend that a fee in lieu be required and that the completion of the gap be identified as funded so that construction can begin quickly after the right-of-way negotiations are completed. So with that, I conclude it and I offer questions. I also want to say that if the construction of this sidewalk is not conditioned as part of a larger development, it is very unlikely to be constructed until the county identifies funding in its budgets. Development is usually where we get our public improvements from. I'll stop share.
And you'll submit if it's not with Ms. Lord, you'll go ahead and submit it again.
Correct.
Once, just send it to her again. 2 copies, 1 can be deleted.
Will do.
That's better than missing it and leaving it a loose end like that. Thank you, sir. I thought it was your points were very specific and well argued. At this point, this is the typical rebuttal period. But I'm not sure that it's fair to just ask the applicant to rebut just at this verbally without having a chance to really look into all of the material that you presented. And I understand there are some engineers in the room and that they followed every single word and are not going to have to parse it over the way I am. But I still think that I'd like them to have an opportunity to review that and provide a written rebuttal. However, if there are some comments from the applicant or the county that you want me to consider with respect to the appellant's arguments just made, then I'm open to that right now as well.
We definitely have comments that I would like to
Oh,
make.
I know you'll have comments. So I was trying to make clear that I'm not sure you'll want verbal comments or if you'll want to provide a written responsive comment or both.
I think we would like to provide verbal comments.
Okay.
We'd also like to hear from the county honestly, because we want to
Yes.
know
And
is
Mr.
the
Kent
onus
as
on
well.
us to address these or what. So we can provide our comments, and then I would like to hear from Ken Kent from engineering.
Me too.
Okay, great. So are we next then?
Yes.
Okay, terrific. Yeah, and we did get this memo from Will Farley at 5 o'clock yesterday evening, so our comments are pretty generalized. Additionally, there were two other
And I didn't, and this is all new to me, and except for I did receive his memorandum and I reviewed that in detail. My point was I didn't want to put you on the spot.
Okay. We also got two letters from neighbors I want to address in our comments as well. So, for brevity, we have talking points. I'm just going to read them just to make sure we hit everything. So, here we go. As the applicant, we met the county's requirements for scoping and preparing the traffic impact analysis per county code, and county engineering approved the project based on information provided in the TIA. As such, we've met the requirements imposed by county engineering and support their findings so the project meets the approval criteria of section 10,007. Road or 1007 roads and connectivity, specifically section 1007.07, which determines that the capacity of the transportation facilities is adequate based on the improvements identified in the traffic impact study. The appellant has cited the general provisions of section 1007.01 as requiring pedestrian connectivity. However, this code section never explicitly calls out off-site connectivity for pedestrians. The more specific code standard, which is section 1007.04 F2 for pedestrian facilities, explicitly indicates that the only location sidewalk improvements are required for an institutional development is on, quote, the street frontage of the lot upon which the development is proposed. The final staff decision issued by the county addresses section 10,007.01 C and D, which specifically address roads and connectivity, and includes provisions pertaining to pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicle access, safety, and traffic flow. The report finds that based on an estimate trip generation of 2,053 vehicle trips per day, the improvements of the Concord frontage is warranted, but that once these improvements are conditioned, the approval criteria of the section is met. Likewise, staff analysis for section 1007.02 F, road frontage improvements, and 10,007.04 C, pedestrian and bicycle facilities, made the same conclusions. The applicant is proposing to improve the street frontages on both Concord Road and Spalding Court with pedestrian amenities meeting the roadway standards, as well as upgrading the existing mid-block crosswalk on Concord. These required improvements are proportional to the amount of development proposed on the site and will sufficiently mitigate any resulting impacts to the transportation system the project will create. The appellant's arguments about proportionality of the improvements does not take into account the construction costs of the street improvements already proposed, which beyond pedestrian facilities also include a full half street improvement to Concord Road, full reconstruction of the terminus of Spalding Court, and a new right turn only intersection at the intersection of McLaughlin and Riceley Avenue. There's no nexus in section 10,007 of the Clackamas Zoning and Development Ordinance that would require the applicant to improve the frontages of the property that they currently do not own or control. Furthermore, an on-street pedestrian connection to Oakfield Road would not alleviate connectivity issues in this overall system, since there's not a robust pedestrian infrastructure on Oakfield Road. And then these next two are like based on the letters that we got from the neighbors. So I just want to go over them. The proposed number of parking spaces for the project is based on the Institute of Transportation Engineers, the IT, a well-established source. The standards of the IT are based on dozens of real-world studies of similar uses in urban settings and therefore recognized industry-wide as an accurate source for calculating parking. Additionally, the number of spaces proposed has been informed by current parking demands at the existing Oak Lodge Library and other recreational facilities operated by Clackamas County Parks and Recreation District. Even though no code minimum parking is required for the site, the parking must still adequately serve the proposed use without causing significant spillover and therefore impacts into the surrounding neighborhood. We are confident that the parking provided meets this balance, and the staff decision determined that the standards of section 1015 have been met with the number of spaces provided. Next point. We are aware that there's an existing outfall pipe located on the property directly north of the site because it was identified on the site survey. This off-site pipe drains to an area of the site where there is absolutely no development or disturbance proposed. Additionally, this area is a slope that has been heavily modified from its natural condition in order to retain the hillside. As such, it is unlikely that this feature meets the bar for a quote natural area that is protected by section 1011, defined as quote an area of land or water that is substantially retained its character and function as an important habitat for plant and animal life. Additionally, these standards only apply to areas that are indicated as open space on the comprehensive plan, and this drainage is located in the residentially zoned portion of the site that has a comprehensive plan designation of LDR, or low density residential. The staff decision concluded that section 1011 does not apply to this project, and we concur. And then I just want to hand it over to Dana Beckwith, our transportation engineer, who has like a couple more points on the TIA.
Sure. I'm Dana Beckwith with Global Transportation. A couple of the comments that I wanted to address were from the letters from the neighbors. I just wanted to, and we'll provide written testimony on this, so I think I will be brief. One of them was concerning the counts being done during COVID, not being appropriate. It is true the counts were done during COVID. However, we followed processes developed basically by the Oregon State DOT on adjusting volumes to account for that time frame, where we actually look at historic data and the current data and apply percentages of adjustments in order to get our numbers back up to pre-pandemic volume levels. Because as we all know, during the pandemic, volumes dropped, and we want to make sure that we're at least within that range. And I just want to note that that is very well spelled out within the TIA on what that methodology was and how those growth rates and everything were applied to the study. The other one was, the other comment I wanted to address is we didn't address vineyard traffic appropriately. As part of the TIA process, it's common, and with Clackamas County, that we develop methodology memos, provide that to the county in advance of doing the TIAs for them to evaluate how we're going to approach the project and provide input for us to add any areas that we may have missed in our approach to the TIA. That approach was also followed with ODOT, since we are up against 99E as well. So they both were provided methodology memos in advance of developing the TIA. And through that collaborative process, we came up with the study area and intersections that you see, or you will see in the TIA. There was also another comment in the letter about the volumes weren't appropriately adjusted, that we didn't provide enough growth in there. Actually, we did provide sufficient growth. We looked at historical counts and current counts, and we looked at growth rates and applied those appropriately to get into the 2025 future condition that we were ultimately evaluating. And that kind of equates over, we were also, it kind of indicates that we didn't look at the appropriate streets and intersections. Again, I'll lean back to, we provided methodology memos, collaboratively worked with the county and state to identify the intersections we needed to look at. Herald Street came out, I think in the letter, as well as not appropriately being analyzed. That's mainly because we are not anticipating a significant portion of vehicle traffic going down that route. and changing the characteristics of the roadway that it is today. Another comment came up about crash data. And, you know, we're all conscious of pedestrians, bikes, crashes, and we don't want to belittle that at all. The letter comes out and looks at national statistics, which are great. It provides a need, especially from the planning level. But what we're looking at is specific locations, a specific project, specific intersections. Within the TIA, and this is very well spelled out within the TIA, we looked at the ODOT SPIS lists. Yes, there's a couple intersections as identified on the top 10%, which really get a lot of attention from the state. Vineyard is down at the 15% level, but as a project specific TIA, we looked at all the accident data. The letter specifically calls out the intersection of Vineyard. There's quite the discussion within the TIA about that intersection. Unfortunately, there's a couple pedestrian accidents there, one including a fatality. And unfortunately, one of the factors contributing factors to that accident included drug use for either, and we don't know whether it's specific to the motorist or the pedestrian. So it becomes difficult when we look at it, we look for crash patterns, and we were not finding crash patterns at that location that would be exacerbated or solved with this particular project in mind. The final thing I wanted to just discuss real quickly, I keep hearing that we equate our current site to the previous school site. Nowhere within the TIA will you see that reference, other than there is a comparison that as a community center, you are going to, and Mr. Farley said as much in his testimony there, that you are going to pull traffic, peds, bikes, a lot of traffic from your local community because it is a community-oriented development. That is what the extent of the TIA is referencing. It's not referencing trip generation. In fact, you'll see no comparison of a trip generation in there between the two uses. And it doesn't equate the parking to the use. So I just kind of wanted to clarify that because we noticed it in the letters from the memos. Mr. Farley had mentioned it. So I just wanted to make sure that it was clear that when we reference that, we are talking about where we think that people are going to be coming from to visit the site. I think that was pretty much what I wanted to cover. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Did the applicant have someone else? All right. Is there a request to keep the record open to submit additional materials for me to consider? I would like to see some additional materials.
Yeah. Are we gonna hear from Ken Kent?
I don't know. He's not here that I can see, or maybe it's not showing him on. Oh, I don't see him on my screen.
Okay.
Oh,
Just
there
waiting
you
until
are.
we were ready. So I said to speak. Yeah, Ken Kent with
Thank you.
engineering. Yeah, I can respond. The applicant has summarized sort of the decision process and the approval criteria fairly well. I think as what was considered for this conditional use from the design review, and also what's considered on the conditional use. A couple of things. I know there was a lot of discussion about the pedestrian connectivity in the area and off-site, and I think as Debbie also mentioned, our standards do provide for pedestrian improvements along the frontage of a project site, but the county does not have an adopted standard or requirement for off-site connectivity. There would need to be some trip generation rate. I know Mr. Farley mentioned that IT may have some numbers on that, but obviously for the county to determine that off-site pedestrian connections could be required, we'd have to adopt a code standard that's specified when and at what level those could be required. So as it is right now, offsite connectivity isn't required for developments, but those connectivity on the project site in terms of pedestrian improvements are required. And that's what was at least conditioned under the approval through design review, and the conditional use was to improve the current frontage of the site on Concord Road, and then the Spalding Court for the small portion of right of way that is there. I'll note that the cross section for Concord Road is conditioned to meet the arterial standards. The cross sections within that comprehensive plan include an arterial with a number of different components, which could be multiple lanes, turn lanes, 3, 4, 5 lane sections, and then the roadway standards have more specific cross sections. So that would include for a 2-lane section or 3-lane. In this case, most of the frontage is going to be the 2-lane arterial section. Their applicant is required to upgrade the frontage to include a landscape strip and an 8-foot wide sidewalk along that Concord Road frontage, providing that pedestrian connection across the entire frontage. As I mentioned, there's no provision for continuing sidewalks beyond that. Essentially, that falls into the realm of our transportation system plan and capital improvement plan. And some of that is already addressed. I think Mr. Farley mentioned that we do have a capital improvement plan for Concord Road that would fill in the pedestrian gaps between, I believe it's River Road and Oakfield. It's on our 20-year plan. But again, there's not a process for a project like this to contribute funds in a fee in lieu in that nature. We would have to determine that there, again, that there's a sort of that nexus or the code that would require offsite pedestrian connection. So it is not required. And I think that did summarize the other traffic impact and how those were evaluated. County staff was concurred with the traffic study that evaluated the offsite intersections and offsite impacts from the development. And based on those evaluations and determinations, showed that with the proposed development, the intersections within the impact area of this development will continue to operate within our mobility standards for transportation impacts and meets the standards. So I think that covers the main items. If there are any other questions from our end.
I do. So Ms. Click referenced the cost of the improvements that are already in the project, like the frontage improvements that you just referenced, and the mid block, thank you, crosswalk, and the change to the roadway itself. I believe there was a rededication and a rebuilding of that with the sidewalk and the landscaping strips. Was a cost analysis of that done as well? I know some of your projects you'll do a proportionality test and determine whether it falls within that. I don't recall seeing that in this case, but I don't know if it was even a question because the applicant may not have even asked for that.
There was not a specific proportionality analysis. I think there was some conversation or discussion of that. The finding through the land use process was based on the increased trip generation, or at least the generation that resulted in this site. If we ignore the prior school use, which has been vacant for a number of years, so just based on the number of trips that we found that it requiring the frontage improvements and the pedestrian crossing on the site frontage were warranted.
That mid block pedestrian crossing, is it just a painted crossing, or is it the type with the lights and the trigger? Or
it's painted, but it does have let's see, I know it has some signage.
It has signage. Oh, okay, like a crosswalk alert sign. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I don't have the exact term. I think it's whether it's advanced. I don't have the term in front of me. Advanced warning sign or advanced. We'll have to look up the numbers, but I don't believe whether it has the flashing beacons or not. But it is required be brought up to current standards as far as the signing necessary and ADA access across the sidewalk into the site
Okay.
of the crosswalk.
Current standards,
It's
ADA access. Yeah, okay. Did the applicant have something further or want to ask a clarifying question?
I would like to ask a clarifying question if it's possible.
Sure.
And I don't know how proportionality is calculated at the county, and so I just want to know if we provide a fee estimate of what we think the street improvements are going to cost as part of our rebuttal. Is the way that Will Farley calculated our proportionality in his memo correct? Like the 44% and the 1.25 million, is that how the county would be calculating? Because I don't want to try and hit a bar if his math isn't the way you're going to do it. I don't,
Okay.
I don't want to.
I have not reviewed that in detail as far as whether that's how we would calculate it. We do not have a specific format for proportionality, or the county hasn't adopted anything. From the legal standpoint, it's rough proportionality, so it's generally weighing traffic impacts, scale of development. There are a number of ways that it can be done, so it's more of making that evaluation based on traffic impacts. Typically, it's related to trips, and looking at similar projects. In some cases, you can look at we have SDC fees might play into this, but we look at the cost of improving any particular frontage and what impacts on the road system. So there isn't a particular method, although I think that proportionality was relating, as presented by Mr. Farley, relating to off-site pedestrian improvements. And as it is right now, our code doesn't have an ability to even require that. So I'm not sure that we can, even if we were to show it, there's some level of proportionality that would warrant building sidewalks off-site. The code doesn't have the authority to require that of this development, at least that I'm aware of.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So let's discuss a timeline then for an open record period here. And the statement that I'll read is, does any party or member of the audience want an opportunity to provide additional evidence, arguments, or testimony? Does the applicant wish to waive the period for final written arguments? Okay, so the timeline for additional. Now, what I typically would discuss would be a 7-day period for each of the parties to submit additional evidence, written argument into the record for consideration and making a decision in this matter, followed by a second week period for written rebuttal of the materials submitted during that first week, followed by a third 7-day period for the applicant to make a last word on this. Yes, sir, Mr. Farley.
I'd like to have it 7 days for new written public testimony, 7 days written responses from the general public to the new testimony, 7 days for the appellant's final response, and then 7 days for the applicant's final response.
We would like to just so that would be 4 additional weeks.
That would be 4 additional weeks instead of 3.
I believe this could be done in 3 weeks.
The statute is, as I read it, Mr. Farley, so it is 777. I don't see any particular need to, provide an additional week. It looks like all of your materials are pretty comprehensive.
Okay.
I don't see that anything brand new was introduced today by the applicant. They look to respond with in support of the application that they provided and provide an explanation of why that happened. I didn't provide an opportunity for public testimony. I should make an opportunity for public comments, but I do want to talk about the the open record period as well. Want to think about that a minute, and I'll open this to general public for a bit. Are there members of the general public that would like to provide a comment today for consideration?
I have one hand raised. It is Neil Nelson. Neil put his hand down,
Yeah.
but now it's back up. We'll have Neil Nelson followed by Joseph Edge.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. First of all, I want to make sure you guys all know how much we appreciate as a neighborhood the amount of effort and time that you have put into this. We really do appreciate the library project, the community center, and we just want you to know that you guys are awesome and we appreciate it. I am
State your
working together
address.
with Bill.
Please state your address.
Oh yeah, it's 4205 Southeast Concord Road.
Thank you.
It's just a couple blocks up from the proposed library. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to state my opinion. I have a lot of neighbors who live in the neighborhood just directly up the hill from Oakfield and Concord, people who will utilize this. So I'm the father of 3 young girls, and I'm heavily involved in this neighborhood. And I know that there's a huge desire for a walkability for our kids in particular, but the entire community to be able to walk down there. I did just send a video to Ms. Lord earlier. It's a 12-second video. It's not super great, but basically what it was is one of my neighbors was walking my daughters up Concord Road on the proposed side from the groundbreaking of the library. And the very end of the video actually got cut off because that neighbor who was walking my daughters felt that it was unsafe and needed to rush the kids off from a car that was turning right going down Concord. And I've spoken with many neighbors, and I'm not sure if you want me to kind of list them off, but I have, easily 20 to 30 neighbors that I've spoken to who want me to speak on their behalf as to the importance of this for them. One of them is Nancy Peltomalaki. She was a school bus driver for 30 years from North Clackamas, and wanted to reiterate a few things. She said, I have been a school bus driver for North Clackamas District for 35 years. I drove for Concord Elementary many years, and our children attended Concord Elementary. It was considered unsafe to allow students to walk down Concord Road from Oakfield to school. We lived right up the hill, right on the uphill corner of Concord and Oakfield. Our children were bused to school, and it fell within the state's guidelines because there was no safe place to walk until you got to the Herald right at the school. I also had a neighbor, Polly Lugosi, who had to jump off the call. She would like to comment and say that they have a special needs daughter that has always needed a sidewalk, down Concord. She would be utilizing this facility a lot in her future, and we have never felt safe with her walking from Oakfield down road to the Concord school. Having a sidewalk would open up a world of opportunity for her. Let's see. The last thing to communicate to is that all the neighbors that I'm speaking on behalf, live within the half-mile radius of that, and we're also working on a secondary project, which is kind of the next step after this, because View Acres Road, Risley Road, Hill Road do not connect with Concord, except for on Oakfield where there's no sidewalks. We are working also on a process of getting a path that will go from View Acres to Concord, which would open up that whole neighborhood to utilize this same sidewalk as well. Lastly, I would like to just state that I'm a real estate agent, and the reason that is important is because I see how the demographic of this neighborhood is changing quite intimately, and I am seeing quite a change to some of the older generation who is moving on and being replaced by a younger generation that I do believe would utilize this significantly more in the future.
Okay.
That's all I have for you guys today. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your participation, sir. Another comment? Is there another hand up?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, but I can't see your name. See if I can fix that. Nope.
So Joseph Edge.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Joseph Edge. My address is 14850 Southeast River Forest Drive in Oak Grove. And I'm the chair of I'm the land use chair of the Oak Grove Community Planning Organization. And we just discussed this appeal hearing last night. And so I'm definitely in support of leaving the record open for more written public testimony. We can notify our members of the opportunity and just give more people the opportunity to weigh in. Excuse me?
That would be excellent. Public
Perfect.
participation.
Personally, not as a representative of the CPO, but as a longtime resident since I was a child, and as someone who's had siblings and cousins who went to Concord Elementary. I am in support of the project. I'm also in support of Mr. Farley's proposed solution to the connectivity problem to the east. In looking at ZDO-1007, although it may not be directly applicable, there is precedent for off-site improvements for access ways described in as pedestrian facilities, and this might be an opportunity to consider an amended access way type design along the road along the north side of Concord. And then additionally, considering that this is a condition of approval that we're looking at on this permit as a result of the additional transportation impacts, I think it is important to note that Mr. Farley's memo described that the safe connectivity for pedestrians is kind of assumed even without pedestrian facilities on streets that are classified as local streets in the transportation system plan. And so I encourage you not to focus on the absence of pedestrian facilities on Oakfield Road specifically, but to consider the fact that across Concord to the east, that Concord Road is a local street. And so therefore does provide safe pedestrian movement on a lower volume street into those communities to the east. So it's not really important at this juncture that Oakfield is not fully equipped with pedestrian facilities. So just with those things in mind and leaving the record open, I just wanted to weigh in just a little bit. And again, I support Mr. Farley's testimony and don't need to repeat everything. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have another comment.
I have Christine followed by Havila F.
Okay.
Good afternoon. I'm Christine Zetterberg. I live at 15225 Southeast Meadowlark Lane here in Oakfield Ridge. And
spelling your last name, please.
Z is in Zulu, E is in Echo, T is in Tango, T is in Tango, E is in Echo, R is in Romeo, B is in Bravo, E is in Echo, R is in Romeo, G is in Golf.
Okay, and you said Meadow
Lark, like
Meadowlark.
the bird. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm one of Neil's older neighbors. My husband and family have lived here since 1996. Our children went to Concord Elementary. Much as he stated at that time, our children were not allowed to walk across or alongside Concord to school, even though we just lived 3 blocks away. I have not done a scientific traffic study, but I've lived here long enough to see that the volume of traffic on Oakfield Road has increased in numbers and in speed and recklessness since we have lived here. My husband used to take the TriMet to work every day. Several times he was almost hit. He was healthy guy in his 40s, left a few scratches on cars who almost ran him down as he was waiting for the bus or crossing. So I would understand that this project, improving sidewalks, is not part of the library community project, and but Oakfield Road, the neighborhoods, not just children, but people of all ages, it's very dangerous. And I think people may be surprised how many people will end up using this facility, because we just don't have that much around here. So those are my comments, and thank you for allowing me to speak.
Oh, thank you. I'll definitely consider your input. Do we have another public participant with a hand up?
I have Havila F.
Okay.
Yes, Havala Firstweiler. Hello.
Oh, I'm going to need a spelling for that, please.
Of course. First name is Havillah, and last name is Firstweiler. F as in Frank, ER, S as in Sam, CH, WEILER.
Thank you. And your address?
Is 15178 Southeast La Crescenta Way.
La Crescenta Way, that's new. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
So thank you for the opportunity to talk. Mine also is going to be, I don't have as much of the background and land use statutes and so forth. So mine's going to be more just as a neighbor who's lived here for 20 years now. I will say the one thing that kind of stood out to me is when we're talking about the use and the projected use at this site, there are a number of people. I, like Neil, also have 3 daughters. Right now we use our library on McLaughlin at least 2 to 3 times a week. We go there, drive there, of course. I anticipate hoping to use this library just as much, if not more. And that being said, I know a lot of people in our neighborhood that don't use our McLaughlin library because it's kind of a small library. They go to Leading Library, but I do think this new improved library is going to be pretty exciting. And it's going to have a lot of the resources that I think a lot of our neighbors right now go to Leading to get. So what I'm trying to say is, I know there's all these predictions and it's very hard to look ahead how many people will want to use this. I will say, just from my own talking to neighbors, I have quite a few neighbors, like I said, that are hoping to use this space. They're all people that would be within our neighborhood that don't currently go to the site, obviously, because there's not a library there yet. But once there is, people will be very excited to go. And that being said, I also am one of those people that has kids that I would love to be able to have the opportunity to walk there, but currently I probably would not want them to walk there. It's pretty dangerous. Every time I've tried to walk that, I kind of walk it like, okay, we're here, let's go. And everybody kind of rushes down the hill or up the hill. So that being said, I just think that, for the safety of the site, the safety of the children that are coming from our neighborhood, of which we have quite a few, I would love us to consider making just that slice, that one part from Concord to the library. We're used to not having a lot of sidewalks in our neighborhood, but that slice would make a big difference in our community. And I think it would really create the vibrancy that we're spending all this money to get at our library, and the usage would go up if we could send our children without, and our families without having to drive there. So thank you for your time. Thank you, Mr. Farley, for all the work you've done, and all the rest of you as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have Mark Elliott.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Mark Elliott, and I live at 32, I forgot my address already, 3238 Southeast Riesling Road. I was a member of the Concord School Task Force, and am also a vice chair of the Oak Grove CPO along with Joseph Edge. And I just wanted to make one comment and also ask for some clarification. First comment is that throughout the design process that the task force was involved in, public safety was really a very high level element of our concern. And, you know, personally, I was surprised that from the traffic report that was done, that a left turn lane was not required coming from McLaughlin Boulevard going to Oatfield in order to turn into the site because of its proximity to other driveway approaches to Walmart and to the other stores, including grocery outlet. My thought was that the additional amount of traffic would precipitate the need for a left turn lane in order to clear the road going to the east, but that was evidently not required by the traffic study that was performed. So I think I'm very much in favor of any improvements that can be made to Concord Road to accommodate both pedestrian and bicycle traffic, and I think that's a very high priority. My question, I guess the thing that I wanted to ask for clarification on is to what degree that the offsite improvements are required by this applicant for making those improvements beyond their property line. And I'm not sure I understand from the testimony that's been made so far, what is that requirement currently under the current county code? Thank you.
Mr. Kent, did you want to respond to that?
And just so I understood, it was the requirement related to off-site improvement.
I don't mean to put you on the spot. I thought
No,
I heard you already kind of cover this.
Yeah, the only provisions that are in the county code for off-site improvements relate to transportation capacity, and those are typically off-site intersections. So if we're looking at a project is going to contribute X number of vehicles, new vehicles into an intersection, and that causes that intersection to exceed our standards or fail, then through the county's, it's called concurrency requirements in the zoning ordinance, can require that the developer needs to mitigate that or correct that, which might include a left turn lane, might include a offsite signal installation. And then there's some provisions in our concurrency standards that may allow a developer to pay a fee if there's already a project in the works on our capital improvement project, and they can pay funds toward that. But those are the only off-site specific requirements, and they're related to transportation capacity. As I mentioned before, there isn't an off-site requirement that addresses pedestrian connectivity. That's something that's handled in our the transportation system plan and the capital improvement plan. I will note for, depending on whatever happens with this project, but in general, the county is starting an update of our transportation system plan, sort of an update. I know that may be a year or two long process, and some of these folks may be familiar with that. But obviously, these concerns for connectivity and sidewalk projects in and around this area those are the kind of things that would need to be involved in that update to the transportation system plan. That's where the county can set priorities on projects where we improve roads or create pedestrian connections.
How are citizens involved in that process? Is it through the county board of commissioners or a committee?
Ultimately, because it would, it's an amendment to the comprehensive plan. I believe there are public meetings as they go through, and there've been some initial. I'm not involved directly with that, but there are some. I think there's a section on the county's webpage that talks about longer range planning projects, and the transportation system plan is one of them.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Did that answer your question, Mr. Elliott?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other members of the public that have a comment? Please raise your hand in the chat. For Ms. Renhard. Nope, that's it. Okay, so our discussion about the open record period. 7 days for submission of new materials and evidence in support of the application or support of the appeal and the conditions that were, I don't know if you would call them, or additional requirements advocated by the appellant, I think is fair. 7 days for responsive arguments to those new materials, and 7 days for the last word by the applicant. And that will fall on a Thursday. Materials on each due date are due by 4 p.m. Let's see the exact date. October, I have it as October 19th at 4 p.m. Okay. Are there any questions about that? Nope. Okay. Well, with that, then I'll close the hearing. I'll look for a submission of new materials on that schedule for 4 p.m. in 7 days for those new materials. Rebuttals due 4 p.m. on Thursday, the 12th, and the applicant's last word due by the 19th. If the applicant decides to waive some or all of the portion of that last period, just let the county know, and we can close the record at that time for that. Just let Ms. Lord know. All right. With that, thank you all for your participation. I'll receive all the materials and carefully consider them in reaching a decision. Thank you.
Hi, Carl. I just
Yes.
have Jason Varga here with
Yes,
one
please.
last question. When we're closed with the record, what is you have to make a decision, right? You have time to make a decision. Could
Yes.
you share what that time frame is, or
I think that I actually have up to 20 days to do that, but I've never taken that long. So, and I do not intend to start with this one. I generally it's within 2 weeks.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Everyone good? Thank you all for your participation, and nice to meet you all as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I did get Will Farley's PowerPoint sent to my email works now. I didn't miss any
Perfect.
emails from people saying, hi, I can't get in. So I think we're good on that front. So I got it.
I was a little thrown today off a little bit, and I apologize for that.
Well, you didn't let it